Jennifer, Syme, and Keanu Reeves, Family Vacation Snap, 1999. Jennifer was born on December 7, 1972, and grew up in Laguna Beach, California. When she was 16, she moved to Los Angeles with her mother. She loved movies and was a big fan of director David Lynch. She wanted to work with him, so she went to his office and asked for a chance. She got an internship at his production company and worked there for about 5 years. She even helped with music for his film Lost Highway and was involved with Mulholland Drive, which many believe is dedicated to her. Jennifer later worked as a personal assistant to musicians like Dave Navarro of Jane's Addiction and Red Hot Chili Peppers. She also acted a little, worked as a record executive, and took film classes at UCLA. At some point in the 1990s, Jennifer met Keanu Reeves. There are different stories about how they met. Some say it was at a party for Keanu's band Dogstar. Others say they knew each other for years before that. Jennifer's mother said she was with her daughter when she met Keanu in 1989. In 1999, Jennifer became pregnant with Keanu's child. On Christmas Eve that year, their daughter, named Ava Archer Syme Reeves, was stillborn. This heartbreaking loss deeply affected both of them. The pain caused a lot of stress in their relationship, and they broke up a few weeks later. However, they stayed close friends. Some reports say they had started seeing each other again before Jennifer passed away. On April 1, 2001, Jennifer went to a party at musician Marilyn Manson's house. She was driven home by someone else early in the morning, but not long after she decided to go back to the party. While driving her Jeep Grand Cherokee in Los Angeles, she lost control and crashed into several parked cars. She was not wearing a seatbelt, and she was thrown from the car. Jennifer died instantly. She was only 28 years old. The police later found 2 rolled-up dollar bills with white powder on them in her car, along with prescription medicine bottles. A toxicology report confirmed she had alcohol and other substances in her system. Her mother told police Jennifer had been getting treatment for back pain from a past car accident and was also dealing with depression after losing her baby. Keanu Reeves was heartbroken. He had reportedly spent time with her earlier that same day and even called the coroner's office when he heard about the crash, asking if Jennifer was there. At her funeral, Keanu was one of the pallbearers, along with David Lynch and Dave Navarro. In 2002, Jennifer's mother sued Marilyn Manson, saying he gave her drugs and convinced her to return to the party. Manson denied this, and the lawsuit was dismissed in 2003. Jennifer was buried at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Her grave is next to her daughter Ava's. Losing a child is one of the hardest things a person can go through, and Jennifer was clearly struggling after Ava's death. Her accident was a tragic end to a life that had so much promise. Thankfully, no one else was hurt in the crash, but we obviously can't know how these back-to-back tragedies impacted Keanu. He lost his daughter, and then just 18 months later, the accident happened. Grief changes shape, but it never ends. People have a misconception that you can deal with it and say it's gone, and I'm better. They're wrong. When the people you love are gone, you're alone. Keanu Reeves. Anne Frank's beach day photo. Like many Amsterdammers, the Frank family made regular trips to Zandvoort. The photo was taken in August 1940. The Germans had already invaded the Netherlands 3 months before, and this is the last time Anne and Margot, Anne's sister, visited Zandvoort. Anne died of typhus in March 1945 in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp at the age of 15, 2 weeks before the camp was liberated. Her sister Margot died a few days earlier than Anne at the age of 19, also of typhus, and also in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. They both had contracted the disease in the winter of 1944. Diane Schuler seen on CCTV for the last time, 2009. In July 2009, one of the worst car crashes in New York's history happened on the Taconic State Parkway. Diane Schuler, a 36-year-old mother, had just left a campground with her family and was driving back to Long Island. It was a trip she had made many times before. But just a few hours later, she was seen driving the wrong way on the highway at full speed. She crashed head-on into another car, and 8 people died, including 4 children. That day, Diane had left the campground around 9 a.m. with her 5-year-old son 2-year-old daughter, and 3 nieces. Her husband Daniel followed behind in another car. Everything seemed normal at first. They stopped for breakfast at McDonald's and picked up snacks and gas along the way. Later that morning, Diane called her brother Warren to tell him traffic was bad. But around 1 p.m., Warren got another call from his 8-year-old daughter Emma. She sounded scared and said Aunt Diane was having trouble seeing and wasn't speaking clearly. Diane then got on the phone herself and said she was feeling confused and her vision was blurry. Warren told her to pull over and he'd come help. But when he arrived at the spot, she said she was gone. Shortly after, other drivers began calling 911. They reported a red minivan being driven wildly, tailgating, honking, weaving between lanes. Some people said they saw the driver pulled over on the side of the road, possibly getting sick. Eventually, the minivan got on the Taconic State Parkway, but in the wrong direction. Diane drove south in the northbound lane at around 80 miles per hour. After about 2 miles, she crashed into an SUV. The crash killed Diane, her daughter, 3 nieces, and 3 people in the other car. Her son Brian was the only one in her car who survived, but he had serious injuries and didn't remember what happened. People who stopped to help at the crash scene said they saw a broken bottle of vodka in the front seat. A toxicology report confirmed Diane had a high level of alcohol in her body, more than twice the legal limit. There was also alcohol still in her stomach, meaning she had recently been drinking. She also had THC in her system, showing she had used marijuana not long before the crash. The report matched what people saw on the road: confused behavior, bad driving, and pulling over to be sick. But many people, especially her family, refused to believe she had been drunk or high. Her husband Daniel said Diane wasn't a drinker and never would have put the kids in danger. He even hired a private investigator to look into it. People who met her during the trip also said she seemed fine. Still, the evidence was strong. Investigators believed she had been drinking vodka in the car while driving. Some theories say she might have been in pain from a toothache. She had tried to buy pain medicine at a gas station and was seen rubbing her jaw during the day. Maybe she drank to feel better. Daniel admitted Diane might have had a drink during the trip and that she sometimes used marijuana to sleep. His sister later said Diane used it regularly. But it still didn't make sense how someone could go from totally normal to that level of intoxication so quickly. Some think Diane had deeper struggles. She had a tough childhood. Her mother died when she was 9, and she had to take care of her younger siblings while also going to school. That kind of stress can affect someone later in life. As an adult, Diane worked hard and took care of her kids. Daniel worked long hours, so she handled most of the parenting on her own. Some wonder if she was secretly overwhelmed or even angry. Her liver didn't show signs of long-term drinking, which makes it less likely that she had been hiding an addiction. So others believe she might have had a sudden breakdown or mental health crisis that day. No one knows exactly what happened during those final moments in the van. After the crash, the governor of New York passed a law that made it a felony to drive drunk with a child in the car. Even today, people are still trying to understand how a mother who seemed so caring could make such a tragic mistake. Heath Ledger's last photo, 2008. This is believed to be the last known photo of actor Heath Ledger, taken in January 2008. At the time, he was filming the movie The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus in London. In this photo, Heath looks tired and distant. He had been working long hours and was struggling with insomnia, unable to sleep for days at a time. Heath had recently finished playing the Joker in The Dark Knight, a role that took a heavy toll on him. He talked about how hard it was to turn off the character once filming ended. To help him sleep, he took prescription pills. Sadly, on January 22, 2008, just days after this photo was taken, Heath was found dead in his apartment in New York. He had accidentally taken too many medications. The medications included painkillers, anti-anxiety drugs, and sleeping pills. Heath Ledger was only 28 years old. Ronald Gene Simmons with his family, 1987. Ronald Gene Simmons was born in 1940 in Chicago, Illinois. When he was just 17 years old, he dropped out of high school and joined the U.S. Navy. Later, he switched to the U.S. Air Force and served during the Vietnam War. He worked in the military for 22 years and retired in 1979 with the rank of Master Sergeant. While he was stationed in Washington, he met a woman named Rebecca, also known as Becky. They got married in 1960 in New Mexico. Over the next 18 years, Ronald and Becky had 7 children. From the outside, they looked like a normal family, but behind closed doors, terrible things were happening. In 1981, one of Ronald's sons went to the police with serious concerns about his father's behavior towards Sheila, his 17-year-old daughter. Some of Sheila's classmates also said she had talked about it, and she was clearly pregnant at the time. Her teachers and neighbors started to believe that Ronald was the father of her baby. Sheila later gave birth to a baby girl named Sylvia Gale. It was soon understood that the baby was the result of what people were already suspecting. Sheila moved out of the house with her baby and later married a man named Dennis McNulty. Together, they had a son named Michael. When the police began to investigate, Ronald became very controlling. He didn't let his wife or kids go anywhere without him. Sheila was eventually forced to testify in court, and Ronald was charged, but before the police could arrest him, he took his whole family and ran away. They left New Mexico and moved to a quiet piece of land near Dover, Arkansas. The family settled on 13 acres of land in a remote area. They lived in 2 mobile homes that had been joined together. The house had no phone and no running water. Ronald even built a high brick wall around the home to keep people out. He was trying to hide his secrets from the outside world. Neighbors later said that Ronald was a scary man who didn't like to talk to anyone. He drank a lot and gave cold, hard stares. He worked several low-paying jobs in the nearby town of Russellville. He was not very well liked at work and had problems with several of his co-workers. He seemed angry and bitter most of the time. By 1987, things in the Simmons household were getting worse. Becky, Ronald's wife, was tired of living under his control. She had been unhappy for a long time and wanted to leave him. Her family believed that she was secretly saving money to escape. In a letter she wrote before her death, she said, "I don't want to live the rest of my life with Dad. I'm a prisoner here, and so are the kids." Around this time, Ronald quit his job at a local mini-mart on December 18th. A few days later, on December 22nd, he bought a .22 caliber handgun from Walmart. That same day, he began his killing spree. Ronald first attacked and shot his oldest son, Ronald Jr. Then he shot his wife, Becky. After that, he murdered his 3-year-old granddaughter, Barbara, who was Gene's daughter. He placed their bodies in a pit he had forced his children to dig earlier in the backyard. He had told them it was for a new outdoor bathroom, and they had believed him. Later that day, more of the children came home from school. Ronald told them he had Christmas presents to give them, and wanted to do it one at a time. This was just a trick. He took each child out one by one and killed them. He drowned his 17-year-old daughter Loretta, 14-year-old son Eddie, 11-year-old daughter Marianne, and 8-year-old daughter Becky. After murdering them, Ronald waited quietly at home for the next 4 days. He knew that more family members were coming to visit after Christmas. On December 26, 2 days after the first murders, more of Ronald's family showed up for a late holiday visit. First came his 22-year-old son Billy, Billy's wife Renata, 21, and their 20-month-old son Trey. Ronald shot and killed the adults. Then he drowned the child. Next came Sheila, the daughter he had hurt years before, along with her husband Dennis, and their 2 children, Sylvia, who was 6, and Michael, who was almost 2 years old. Ronald shot Sheila and Dennis. He drowned Sylvia and Michael. Also, it's worth mentioning that police didn't exactly know which ones he drowned and which ones he strangled because he used both methods. He then placed the adult bodies inside the house in a row and covered them with coats. He covered Sheila's body with a tablecloth. He put the bodies of Sylvia and Michael in the trunks of old cars on the property. After finishing the murders, Ronald sat in the house watching TV with the dead bodies around him. He even went out to pick up some Christmas gifts and had a drink at a nearby bar. On December 28th, Ronald left the house and drove into the town of Russellville. He brought his gun with him and went to several places where he used to work. His first stop was a law office called Peel and Eddy. There he shot and killed a 24-year-old secretary named Kathy Kendrick. Ronald had once been obsessed with her, but she had rejected him. Next, he went to Taylor Oil Company, where he shot the owner Rusty Taylor. Rusty survived, but another employee named Jim Chaffin was killed. Then he went to a mini-mart where he used to work. He shot 2 employees there, but both of them survived. A brave customer threw soda cans at Ronald and scared him off. Finally, he went to a trucking company called Woodline Motor Freight, another one of his former jobs. There he shot a woman named Joyce Butts, who was once his boss. She was badly hurt but survived. Ronald then forced another worker to call the police and told her that he was done. When the police arrived, he calmly gave up his weapon and was arrested without a fight. When police searched Ronald's home, they found a total of 14 bodies. 5 were inside the house, 7 were buried in the backyard, and 2 babies were found in car trunks. They also found weapons and ropes that had likely been used in the killings. A disturbing letter was also found in a bank deposit box. It was written by Ronald to Sheila, the daughter he had hurt. In the letter, he blamed her for everything and ended it by saying, "I will see you in hell." During his trial, this letter was shown as evidence. When it was read out loud in court, Ronald became violent. He attacked the prosecutor and tried to grab a deputy's gun, but he was stopped before he could hurt anyone. Ronald Simmons was found guilty of 14 murders and was sentenced to death along with an extra 147 years in prison. The 2 other murders had happened in a different county, but they decided not to hold another trial since he was already sentenced to die. Ronald refused to appeal his sentence. He wrote a statement saying he wanted the punishment to happen quickly. Some people wondered if he was mentally healthy enough to make that decision, but the court allowed it. On June 25, 1990, Ronald Gene Simmons was executed by lethal injection. He never showed much emotion and did not seem sorry for what he had done. In the end, 16 people lost their lives because of one man's evil actions. The house where the murders happened was later torn down. Diem Le Nguyen's last photo. Diem Le Nguyen was a 50-year-old mother of 3. She worked for the U.S. Navy and was known as caring and selfless. On Sunday, June 23, 2024, she joined about 100 other people on a charity hike on Nighthawk Trail at Black Mountain in San Diego. The hike was a fundraiser for the Build a School Foundation. The group began early to avoid the rising heat. Around 8 a.m., the group stopped halfway up the trail. Diem chose to go on ahead as others turned back. She reached the top by about 9:30 a.m. and told her group that she was there. At 10:08 a.m., Diem called her sister. She said she was tired and needed water. After that call, she was not seen or heard from again. That day, San Diego was experiencing its first heat wave of the season. Temperatures reached the high 90s and even over 100 degrees Fahrenheit on the mountain. When Diem did not return, her family and the hike organizers reported her missing. A large search began that evening and went until 1 a.m. with more than 50 volunteers, search dogs, drones, and police. The search started again at 6 a.m. Monday. On Monday, June 24th, at around 9:15 a.m., a body matching Diem's description was found about a quarter-mile off the trail, near homes and a nearby road. The San Diego County Medical Examiner confirmed it was Diem, though no official cause of death was released. "She saved him. Can you save her?" This was the message left on a door inside a house where 2 people mysteriously died, and no one knows how. Rebecca Zahau was born on March 15, 1979 in Myanmar, which used to be called Burma. She spent time living in Nepal and Germany before moving to the United States around 2001. In 2002, she married a 36-year-old nursing student, and they lived in Arizona. In 2008, while working as a surgical tech at an eye clinic, Rebecca met Jonah Shacknai, a very wealthy businessman. He owned a medical cosmetics company. They started dating, even though Rebecca was still married. She didn't officially get divorced until 2011. In 2009, Rebecca was arrested for stealing about $1,000 worth of jewelry from a Macy's store in Arizona. She later admitted to the crime. Rebecca and Jonah lived together in Arizona. Jonah's young son Max would sometimes stay with them. Rebecca's family believed Jonah's ex-wife Dina, who was Max's mother, didn't like Rebecca. Rebecca quit her job in 2010 to spend more time with Jonah. She also stopped going to church because Jonah didn't go. Every summer, the couple stayed at Jonah's vacation home called the Spreckles Mansion in Coronado, California. Jonah had bought this mansion for about $12.5 million. In the summer of 2011, Rebecca, Jonah, Max, and Rebecca's younger sister Zena were at the mansion. On July 11th, Rebecca was watching Max and Zena while Jonah was at the gym. That day, Max fell over a second-floor railing and got badly hurt. He had injuries to his head and spine. Neither Rebecca nor Zena saw the fall, but Rebecca found Max and Zena called 911. Rebecca tried to help Max before paramedics arrived. He was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. The next day, July 12th, Zena left for Missouri. That same day, Jonah's brother Adam Shacknai flew in from Tennessee and stayed in the guest house at the mansion. That night, Rebecca, Jonah, Adam, and a friend had dinner together. After dinner, Jonah went back to the hospital, and Rebecca stayed at the mansion while Adam stayed in the guest house. Adam said the last time he saw Rebecca was around 8 p.m. A voicemail was left for Rebecca that night. It was never found, but Jonah said it was from him and that it gave an update on Max's condition. It's likely the news wasn't good. On the morning of July 13, around 6:45 a.m., Adam said he found Rebecca hanging from the balcony. At first he thought it was a mannequin, but then realized it was her. She had no clothes, was tied up and gagged with a t-shirt. Adam called 911 and cut her down before emergency crews arrived. Rebecca was declared dead at the scene. 3 days later, Max died from brain damage. His death was ruled an accident. However, one of his doctors later said his injuries didn't seem like they came from a simple fall and that he might have been suffocated first. In September 2011, police said what happened to Rebecca was her own doing. They said there was no evidence of foul play in either her death or Max's. Both cases were closed. Rebecca's family didn't agree with that. They believed she was murdered. They filed a lawsuit against Adam Shacknai, as well as Dina and her twin sister Nina. The family claimed that the three had worked together to kill Rebecca. But Dina and Nina were later removed from the case when it was shown Dina was at the hospital when Rebecca died. The civil case continued against Adam alone. The jury decided Adam was responsible for Rebecca's death and awarded her family $5 million. Adam denied any involvement and later appealed. Before the appeal ended, his insurance company paid the family $600,000 to settle the case. Adam still says he had nothing to do with Rebecca's death and that he never left the guest house that night until he found her body in the morning. Now let's look at the details of the case. When Rebecca was found, her hands were tied behind her back, her feet were tied together, and she was gagged. She was tied with red rope, the same rope used to hang her from a second-floor balcony. The rope was tied to a bed in the room next to the balcony. The knots weren't very tight, and the police showed that it was possible to tie your hands in front, move them behind your back, and slip one hand back in. It didn't seem too hard to do. Rebecca also had 4 small marks on the back of her head, possibly from hitting the balcony during the fall. A boot print was found on the balcony, but it turned out to be from a police officer. Only Rebecca's DNA and fingerprints were found on the rope and around the scene. There were no signs of a struggle. A message in black paint was found on a door nearby. It read, "She saved him, can you save her?" A book about witchcraft was found in the room, showing women tied with red rope. Adam, being a tugboat captain, knew how to tie knots. A neighbor said they heard someone screaming for help that night, but police thought the witness wasn't reliable. Another person claimed they saw someone who looked like Dina at the mansion that night, but again, nothing came of it. The autopsy showed Rebecca had no history of mental illness. She was upset about Max's injury, but didn't feel overly guilty about it. There are 2 main theories. Either Rebecca did it herself, or someone killed her. Police believe the first is true. Rebecca was likely very upset after hearing bad news about Max. She was alone in the mansion and probably felt overwhelmed and hopeless. Some say Rebecca was known to act impulsively. which may explain her actions. If she had been murdered, it's hard to explain why there was no physical evidence, no DNA or fingerprints from anyone else, and no signs of a fight. Even a police officer accidentally left a footprint, so how could a killer not leave anything at all? Jared Cano cell phone video. Jared Cano was a 17-year-old former student of Freedom High School in Tampa, Florida. He had been expelled from the school in April 2010 due to an incident that happened off school grounds. Over a year later, in August 2011, Cano planned to carry out a deadly attack at the school on the first day of the new academic year. He intended to use homemade pipe bombs to kill students and teachers. His plan was detailed and carefully organized. He had drawn maps of the school, written out a minute-by-minute timeline of the attack, and collected the necessary materials to build the bombs, including fuel, timers, plastic tubes, fuses, and shrapnel. Cano recorded videos on his phone in which he named specific people he wanted to target and spoke about causing more destruction than the Columbine school shooting of 1999. He kept a written journal where he outlined his attack and expressed his intentions. Cano had a history of drug use, and on social media he often talked about smoking marijuana. He was also previously involved in other criminal activities. His juvenile record included charges related to burglary, carrying concealed weapons, altering serial numbers on firearms, and drug possession, though many of those charges were not pursued. What stopped the attack from happening was a tip given to the police by a student who knew about Cano's plan. Acting on this information, Tampa police arrested Cano on August 16, 2011. With permission from his mother, they searched his home and found all the bomb-making materials, drawings of the school, his detailed journal, and a small marijuana growing setup. The police said that while the bombs were not fully built, the materials he had gathered showed that he was serious about going through with the plan. He was charged with multiple offenses, including threatening to use a destructive device, possession of bomb-making materials, marijuana cultivation, and possession of drug paraphernalia. In December 2012, Cano entered a plea of no contest to the charges. The court sentenced him to 15 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. He also received credit for the 15 months he had already spent in jail. Under Florida law, he is required to serve at least 85% of his prison term before being eligible for release. Although a bomb expert said the materials found might not have been capable of creating a powerful explosion, the judge still considered the plot to be very serious. Cano's videos and journal entries showed that he had a real and dangerous intention to harm others. Thanks to the tip and quick action by police, a possible tragedy was prevented before it could happen. With a friendly wave and a carefree smile, this beachside photo of Brett Peter Cowan could be mistaken for a snapshot of any ordinary young man, but wait until you learn the horrifying truth behind it. Brett Peter Cowan was born in Bunbury, Australia, on September 18, 1969. He was the third of 4 sons in his family. In 1976, they moved to Brisbane. Brett had a hard time in school and struggled with his studies. From a young age, he began showing troubling behavior by hurting boys who were younger than him. This became a pattern in his life. He dropped out of school in year 10 and started training in automotive bodywork, but his parents pulled him out after he came home covered in grease more than once. It turned out this was not due to regular work, but rather some kind of hazing or initiation by other students. Brett's problems continued into adulthood. The police often visited his home, and his parents became frustrated. At age 18, he was arrested for burglary and car theft. In the months that followed, he was arrested again for more theft-related crimes. At one point, he was ordered to do maintenance at a children's playground, which was a poor decision given his past. On December 5, 1987, he hurt a boy at that playground. He later skipped bail, moved to an area near Sydney, and was accused of another similar crime. Though he was arrested and taken to trial, he was not convicted of the most serious charges and only served just over a year in prison. Then on September 23, 1993, Brett attacked a 6-year-old boy in Darwin. He was sentenced to 7 years, but was released after 4.5. He then moved to the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Daniel Morcombe lived in the same area. He was born in Melbourne on December 19, 1989, and had a twin brother named Bradley and an older brother named Dean. In 1993, the Morcombe family moved to Palmwoods, a town on the Sunshine Coast. On December 7, 2003, Daniel was at home with his two brothers while his parents were away at a Christmas party. He decided to go to Sunshine Plaza Shopping Center to buy Christmas presents and get a haircut. He walked to an unofficial bus stop under an overpass on Keel Mountain Road about a kilometer from home. He had about $100, a watch, and a phone card with him. The bus he planned to catch didn't arrive because it broke down, so a replacement bus was sent, which reached the area around 2:10 p.m. Because Daniel was at an unofficial stop and the bus was behind schedule, it didn't stop. The driver pointed behind him to signal that another bus would come soon. The driver also noticed a man standing about 3 meters behind Daniel. That man was Brett Cowan. He convinced Daniel to walk back with him, saying he would drive him to the shopping center. Since the bus had not picked him up, Daniel likely believed him. Brett then took Daniel to a deserted area and murdered him by strangulation. Daniel's parents returned home at 4 p.m. and noticed he wasn't there. Bruce, Daniel's father, went to the bus stop to pick him up, but when the bus came, Daniel wasn't on it. He tried again an hour later, thinking Daniel might be on a later bus, but he still didn't show. Bruce and Denise then went to the shopping center, and when they couldn't find Daniel, they reported him missing to the police. A massive search began, but no sign of Daniel was found. Police followed up on many leads, and one of the suspects was Brett Cowan. He admitted he had driven past the bus stop twice that day to buy marijuana, but his story kept changing and didn't make sense. Still, the police didn't have enough evidence to charge him. For several years, the case remained unsolved. Then the police launched a Mr. Big operation, a strategy where undercover officers pretend to be part of a criminal gang. They try to recruit the suspect and get them to confess. These operations are banned in places like the US and the UK, but are allowed in Australia. In 2011, there was a coroner's inquest into Daniel's disappearance. Brett was forced to testify and traveled from Perth, where he lived. After his testimony, the police began the undercover operation. An officer using the fake name Joe Emery sat next to Brett on the flight back to Perth. During the 5-hour flight, the officer befriended him. Joe told Brett he was moving to Perth and wanted to stay in touch. Soon after, they began meeting up, and Joe introduced Brett to the fake criminal gang, which was made up entirely of undercover police. Over the next few months, Brett was paid for small crimes, like collecting debts and fake burglaries, all staged by the police. His payments grew, and he became more dependent on the gang. In August 2011, they told Brett about a fake job that would pay $100,000. But before he could join, they said he had to be honest about his past, especially the suspicion around Daniel's disappearance. They said they needed to know everything so they could help protect him. Brett didn't want to lose the money or his connection with the gang, so he confessed to killing Daniel. He gave many details about the crime, although he still lied about some of the timing. The police were satisfied with what he told them. Brett was arrested on August 13th and charged with Daniel's kidnapping. 4 days later, Daniel's remains were found in a rural area called the Glass House Mountains. Brett's charges were upgraded to murder. In 2014, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Before launching the operation, police tried to understand Brett's personality. Brett was described as someone with no feelings for his victims, who wanted attention, got bored easily, and lied often. He was also manipulative and very self-centered. He showed signs of both psychopathy and narcissism, which are common traits in people who commit serious crimes. Although Brett was guilty, some people questioned whether the way he was caught was fair. The Mr. Big operation used tricks and false promises to get a confession. Brett was given money, told he was part of a family, and offered a new life. He bought a new car and dreamed about buying a house and even a boat. He didn't want to lose all of that. So while his confession was real, it wasn't freely given. That's why these operations are banned in other countries. They can lead to false confessions, especially from people who are desperate for money or friendship. Another issue in Daniel's case was the involvement of self-proclaimed psychics. They gave the family hundreds of false leads, wasting time and making things worse. Daniel's father later warned other families about trusting psychics, saying they often made everything harder and distracted from real evidence. In the end, it was careful police work and a risky undercover plan that finally brought justice for Daniel Morcombe. Last CCTV image of Reeva Steenkamp alive outside Oscar Pistorius' house. On February 14, 2013, Reeva Steenkamp, a 29-year-old model and law graduate from South Africa, was shot and killed by her boyfriend, Oscar Pistorius. The shooting happened in Oscar's home in Pretoria. Reeva and Oscar had been dating for a few months. Oscar Pistorius was a well-known athlete. He had both of his legs amputated when he was a baby and used carbon fiber running blades. He became famous around the world for running in both the Paralympics and the regular Olympics. On the night of the shooting, Reeva was in the bathroom. Oscar fired 4 shots through the closed and locked door. 3 of the bullets hit Reeva. Oscar then broke down the door with a cricket bat and tried to help her. He called for help, but it was too late. She died at the scene. Oscar said he thought someone had broken into the house and was hiding in the bathroom. He claimed he believed Reeva was still in bed and that the person behind the door was a stranger. The case shocked South Africa and the world. People wanted to know if Oscar had killed Reeva on purpose or if it was really a mistake. Oscar went on trial in 2014. At first, the court said it was not murder but a lesser crime called culpable homicide, which is like manslaughter. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but served only 10 months before being allowed to live under house arrest. Later, the court changed its decision. In 2015, the higher court said Oscar was guilty of murder. He was given a longer sentence, first 6 years, and then over 13 years in 2017 after another review. In January 2024, he was released from prison on parole. He must follow many rules until his full sentence ends in December 2029. Oscar now lives at his uncle's house in Pretoria. He is not allowed to leave the city, drink alcohol, speak to the media, or contact Reeva's family. He has to take part in programs for anger control and violence against women. The police can check on him without warning. His father still says Oscar did not mean to kill Reeva. He believes his son made a terrible mistake, but is not a murderer. Anni Dewani seen on CCTV for the last time. Anni Dewani was born on March 12, 1982 in Sweden. Her parents were Indian but had once lived in Uganda. In the early 1970s, the Ugandan president forced all Asians to leave the country. Anni's parents fled and asked for asylum in Sweden, where they started a new life. Anni grew up in Sweden and later went to college. She studied engineering and eventually got a job with Ericsson, a major telecommunications company. She was doing well in her career, but she also wanted to find love. Anni had a very clear idea of what she was looking for. She wanted to marry someone who was Indian and also financially well off. Thinking she would have a better chance of meeting someone like that in London, Anni visited the city in May 2009. She stayed with her cousin, and while there met a man named Ryen Dewani. He was Indian, wealthy, and Anni found him attractive. They also had some things in common, like Ryen's mother had once lived in Uganda too. The two started a long-distance relationship. In February 2010, Anni moved to London to be closer to Ryen. Just 2 months later, they got engaged. However, their relationship was not perfect. They had arguments and even broke up at one point. But in the end, they chose to move forward and get married. On October 19, 2010, Anni and Ryen had a big, beautiful wedding in Mumbai, India. It was a very expensive celebration. They planned to have a second ceremony in the UK the next year, so that friends who couldn't travel to India could still celebrate with them. After their wedding, the couple went back to the UK briefly before heading off on their honeymoon. On November 7, 2010, they flew to Cape Town, South Africa. From there they went on a safari trip to Kruger National Park and later returned to Cape Town on November 12th. When they arrived at the airport in Cape Town, They took a taxi driven by a man named Zola Tongo. Ryen seemed to like him, so the couple hired him again the next day, November 13th, to be their unofficial tour guide. Ryen thought it would be cheaper to use Tongo instead of the hotel's car service. Tongo drove them around in his van and even took them to dinner. But later that night, something went terribly wrong. Tongo drove them into a very dangerous part of the city. This area was so unsafe that even local people avoided it at night. It was known for frequent murders. While they were driving through that area, 2 armed men stopped their van and forced their way in. One man took over the driver's seat, and the other sat near Anni and Ryen. The robbers took Ryen's phone, wallet, watch, and money. He managed to hide Anni's expensive engagement ring inside the car seats so they didn't find it. About 17 minutes later, the attackers threw Ryen out of the car. They told him they would let Anni go separately. Ryen ran around the streets knocking on doors until someone called the police. The next morning, Anni was found dead in the back seat of the taxi. She had been shot once. The bullet hit her hand, chest, and neck. The neck injury was the most serious and caused her death. Anni also had bruises on her body, but police said there was no evidence of assault. Some of her belongings, like her bracelet, phone, purse, and watch, were missing. Police thought this was a simple robbery gone wrong. Her body was given to Ryen, who took it back to the UK. Later, she was cremated. Soon after, the investigation took a surprising turn. A palm print found in the car helped police find 2 of the attackers, Kwabe and Mngeni. They also arrested a hotel worker named Monde Mbolombo. Oddly, the suspects were allowed to talk to each other in jail. At first, they said it was just a robbery, and that Anni was shot by accident. But later their stories changed. They claimed that Ryen had planned the whole thing. They said it was not just a robbery, it was a plan to kill Anni. Tongo, the taxi driver, also changed his story. At first, he said he had nothing to do with the crime. Later, he said Ryen asked him to arrange the murder. In exchange for their testimony against Ryen, Kwabe and Tongo received lighter prison sentences, 18 and 25 years. Mbolombo was given full legal immunity. Mngeni, however, went to trial. He said police forced him to confess by suffocating him with a plastic bag. Still, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He died from a brain tumor 2 years later. Ryen tried very hard to avoid being sent back to South Africa. He said he had PTSD and depression and wouldn't survive prison there. But in April 2014, he was finally extradited and put on trial. He was charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. At the trial, things didn't go smoothly for the prosecutors. The witnesses gave confusing and conflicting statements. Some lied and changed their stories. It also came out that some text messages and calls were faked. In the end, the judge said there was not enough solid evidence to prove Ryen was involved. The case was dismissed, and Ryen went free. Still, many people wondered if Ryen was truly innocent. There were reasons to doubt him. For example, he had been hiding a big secret. He was gay. He admitted in court that he was living a double life and had been with male escorts. Guests at the wedding said the couple didn't seem happy. Anni had even texted friends right after the wedding saying she might have made a mistake. The killers may have panicked during a robbery or tried to assault Anni, which led to her death. Some people think the South African government had a reason to accuse Ryen. A random killing of a tourist could hurt tourism, but if they blamed the husband, it made the country look safer. In the end, Ryen was never proven guilty. It's still unclear what really happened. Maybe it was just a tragic robbery. Maybe it was something more. We may never know the full truth. Delimar Vera House fire. On December 15, 1997, Luz was at home in Philadelphia with her family. She had just given birth to a baby girl named Delimar 10 days earlier. Everything seemed normal that evening. Luz put Delimar in her crib upstairs and went downstairs to do some chores. Delimar's father, Pedro, was outside helping his cousin Carolyn Correa fix her car. Later, Carolyn came inside and talked with Luz while Pedro worked. Their talk was a little awkward, so Luz kept doing her chores while chatting. Suddenly, they heard a loud sound from upstairs. Smoke started coming down the stairs. Luz ran to get her 2 sons out of the house. Carolyn said she would tell Pedro what was happening. Luz rushed upstairs to get Delimar, but the baby's room was full of flames. She tried to go in, but the fire was too strong. She had to leave without her baby. Firefighters came quickly and put out the fire in 15 minutes. But Delimar's room was completely burned. They told Luz and Pedro that their baby had died in the fire. They couldn't find any remains, but said the fire had been so hot it destroyed everything. Luz was heartbroken, but insisted that her daughter hadn't been in the crib. Everyone thought she was in shock and not thinking clearly. Fire officials said the fire started from a bad extension cord connected to a heater. Luz's family believed the official story, but Luz did not. She believed Delimar was still alive. Years passed, and her belief caused problems in her family. She and Pedro eventually separated. Then, over 6 years later, on January 24, 2004, Luz went to a birthday party. There she saw a girl who looked just like her and had a dimple like her son. She asked around and was shocked to learn the girl was with Carolyn Correa. Luz was sure the girl was her missing daughter. She needed proof. She tricked the girl by pretending she had gum in her hair and pulled out a few strands. Luz put the hairs in a napkin, then in a plastic bag, and left the party. She didn't know what to do, so she went to a local state representative, Angel Cruz, and told him everything. He believed her and helped get a DNA test done. The results proved Luz was right. The girl was Delimar. It turned out Carolyn had taken Delimar the night of the fire, started the fire to cover it up, and then raised the baby as her own. She renamed her Aaliyah and claimed she gave birth at home. No one suspected anything. In 2005, Carolyn was arrested and sentenced to 9 to 30 years in prison. From the outside, it looked like the picture of suburban success, a quiet, happy home. But that same pursuit of success would ultimately lead to a nightmare within its walls. Jennifer Pan grew up in Markham, Ontario with her parents, Han and Bic. Her parents were hardworking immigrants from Vietnam who wanted the best for their children. They had high hopes for Jennifer and her younger brother Felix. But instead of feeling loved, Jennifer felt trapped. Her parents pushed her hard to succeed. From a young age, Jennifer was a talented figure skater and also took piano lessons. She trained every day and dreamed of going to the Olympics, but a serious knee injury ended her skating career. After that, her parents expected her to succeed in school and go to a top university. Jennifer struggled in school. While she did well in music, her other grades were average. She failed a math class in her final year, which caused a university to cancel her early acceptance. Instead of telling her parents the truth, she started lying. She faked her report cards, pretended to graduate high school, and even created fake college documents. Her parents believed she was attending university, but in reality she was spending her days in coffee shops or working part-time jobs. Jennifer was also hiding a long-term relationship with a man named Daniel Wong. Her parents didn't approve of her dating, so she kept it secret. She even told lies to friends, like claiming her dad had hired a private detective to follow her. Eventually, her parents found out about all the lies. They were angry and heartbroken. Her father wanted to kick her out, but her mother convinced him to let her stay. Jennifer had to retake high school courses, and her parents banned her from seeing Daniel. But the two continued to talk secretly. Things got worse when Daniel broke up with Jennifer and started seeing someone else. Jennifer was upset and desperate to win him back. She made up a wild story about being attacked by fake police, saying someone wanted her dead. It was all a lie, but it got Daniel's attention again. Jennifer and Daniel began talking about getting rid of her parents for good. She first paid a man named Ricardo Duncan $1,500 to kill her father, but he disappeared and never went through with it. So she asked Daniel to help her find someone else. Daniel introduced her to a man called Homeboy, whose real name was Lenford Crawford. He said he would do the job for $10,000, half his usual price. Jennifer promised to pay him after getting her parents' life insurance money. On November 8, 2010, the plan was set. Jennifer's brother Felix was at school, her dad Han was reading, and her mom Bic was at a dance class. When Bic came home, Jennifer went downstairs, unlocked the front door quietly, and went back to her room. At around 10 p.m., three men, Lenford Crawford, David Melvagenham, and Eric Carty, entered the house. One of them tied up Bick while the others went upstairs. They dragged Han downstairs and tied him up too. Jennifer acted like a victim and let one of the men tie her hands behind her back, but not tightly. She even showed them where to find money in the house. Bick begged the men not to hurt Jennifer. Then the intruders shot both parents. Bick was shot 3 times and died. Han was shot in the face and shoulder but survived. Jennifer was left tied to a staircase, waiting until they left. Then she called 911, pretending she didn't know what happened. Han managed to run outside and call for help. He survived and was taken to the hospital. Jennifer went to the police station for questioning. At first, police were confused. Why was Jennifer unharmed, and how did she call for help if her hands were tied? They soon found text messages on her phone showing she had planned everything with Daniel and the hitman. When Jennifer realized the police were closing in, she changed her story. She claimed she had hired the men to kill her, not her parents. But the evidence didn't match her claims. Police arrested Jennifer and the 4 men involved. In court, Jennifer's father and brother testified against her. Jennifer, Daniel, Lenford, and David were all found guilty and sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Eric Carty's trial was delayed due to his lawyer's illness. He later pleaded guilty and got 18 years in prison with a chance of parole after 9 years because of his smaller role in the crime. Bick was buried on November 19, 2010. Han couldn't attend his wife's funeral because of his injuries, but he and Felix continue to honor her memory. Neither of them has any contact with Jennifer now. Dawn Brancheau moments before tragedy, 2010. Dawn Brancheau was a well-known and experienced orca trainer at SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida. On February 24, 2010, during a popular show called Dine with Shamu, she was working with a killer whale named Tilikum, the largest orca at SeaWorld. The show seemed normal at first, with visitors eating lunch and watching Dawn interact with Tilikum. But suddenly things went horribly wrong. Dawn was at the edge of the pool doing a routine with Tilikum when the whale pulled her into the water. Some people said he grabbed her by the ponytail, others thought it was her arm or shoulder. In just a moment, she disappeared under the water. The audience was shocked and scared as they watched the powerful animal thrash her around and keep her underwater. This went on for about 45 minutes. To understand why this happened, we need to look at both Dawn's and Tilikum's pasts. Dawn had loved marine animals since she was young. After visiting SeaWorld as a child, she dreamed of becoming a trainer. She worked hard and eventually got the job, spending 15 years working closely with orcas. She was known for her dedication, fitness, and love for the animals. She also knew that working with killer whales was dangerous. Tilikum had a difficult life. He was taken from the wild when he was only 2 years old and sent to a small marine park in Canada called Sealand. There he was kept in poor conditions, often bullied by other whales and used in many daily shows. He was also punished during training. Experts believed all this caused him stress and made him more aggressive. In fact, Dawn was not Tilikum's first victim. In 1991, a young woman named Kelty Burns slipped into his tank and drowned after being pulled under by him and other whales. Then in 1999, a man named Daniel Dukes entered Tilikum's tank at night. The next morning, his body was found on the whale's back, badly injured. These events raised concerns about keeping such animals in captivity, but Tilikum stayed at SeaWorld. Despite knowing Tilikum's history, Dawn formed a close bond with him. Some believe he even cared for her, which made the attack that day even more surprising. After Dawn was pulled in, she suffered severe injuries. The autopsy showed she had drowned and had broken bones and other trauma. SeaWorld at first said that Dawn had made a mistake by being too close to the water with her hair down, but people who were there disagreed. They said she didn't slip. Tilikum pulled her in. Video of the event was taken, but was kept private at the request of her family. After her death, SeaWorld made big changes. Trainers were no longer allowed in the water with orcas. The government also found that SeaWorld had many past reports of dangerous whale behavior. These findings and Dawn's death were a major part of the documentary Blackfish, which showed the problems of keeping orcas in tanks. The film caused public anger and led to boycotts. SeaWorld later said it would stop breeding orcas and that the whales they had would be the last. Don Brancheau's death was a heartbreaking event that made many people question how humans treat intelligent animals like orcas. Lake Gibson concrete blocks, 1991. In June 1991, 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey was living in Burlington, Ontario, Canada. She was a bright high school student who had recently started to rebel a bit, like many teens her age. She had a younger brother named Ryen, and her parents worked hard. Her mom was a teacher, and her dad was often away working as an oceanographer. That month, something terrible happened. One of Leslie's school friends, a boy named Chris Evans, died in a car crash. His funeral was held a few days later. The night before the funeral, Leslie and some of her classmates met in the woods to comfort each other and share their grief. Afterward, a couple of friends walked her home around 2 a.m. Leslie had missed her curfew that night. Her parents had warned her not to be late before. Hoping to teach her a lesson, they locked the doors to the house. Leslie checked the side door first. It was locked. She told her friends it was fine and that the front door would be open. It wasn't. Her friends had already left. Now alone in the middle of the night, Leslie walked to a nearby payphone to call a friend asking if she could stay over. Her friend said no. After a long phone call, Leslie decided to go back home and wake up her mom to let her in, but she never made it. While walking back, Leslie was approached by a man named Paul Bernardo. He told her he had a cigarette, but needed to get matches from his car. When she followed him, he suddenly covered her head and forced her into the car. Paul took her to the house he shared with his wife, Carla Homolka. For the next 24 hours, both Paul and Carla did terrible things to Leslie. They drugged her, hurt her, and recorded what they did on video. Carla worked with animals and had access to powerful sedatives. They even gave Leslie a teddy bear during the assaults, pretending to be kind between the pain they caused her. The next day, on Sunday, June 16, 1991, Leslie was dead. Paul said she died because of the drugs, but Carla said Paul strangled her. Either way, they both agreed that she was murdered in their home. After Leslie's death, Paul and Carla attempted to conceal what had happened by encasing the remains in blocks of concrete. They later disposed of the blocks in Lake Gibson, near St. Catharines, Ontario. 2 weeks later, on June 29, 1991, fishermen found the heavy concrete blocks in the lake. One of them weighed over 200 pounds. When police broke them open, they discovered Leslie's remains. Her braces and dental records were used to confirm her identity. The police believed right away that she had been tortured. Later, when they searched Paul and Carla's house, they found videotapes showing exactly what had happened to Leslie. The tapes showed her being held captive and attacked for hours. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka were finally arrested. The case shocked the entire country. A year after killing Leslie, they had kidnapped and murdered another girl named Kristen French. And 6 months before Leslie, they had also killed Carla's younger sister, Tammy. During the trial, Carla made a deal with prosecutors. She agreed to testify against Paul, and in exchange got a lighter sentence. She was released from prison in 2005. Paul Bernardo, however, was declared a dangerous offender and will spend the rest of his life in prison. Leslie Mahaffey's memory lives on. She is buried at Burlington Memorial Gardens, and her high school created a heart-shaped garden and a memorial bench in her honor. Her story is one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking in Canadian history. A young girl who just wanted to say goodbye to a friend ended up crossing paths with two of the country's most notorious killers. It looks like any happy family photo, but the chilling part is, this child would be the only one left alive by mistake after a massacre inside their own home. It happened in 1983, and to this day, people still don't know for sure who did it. The Ryen family, Doug, Peggy, and their 10-year-old daughter Jessica, were murdered in their home in California. That night, 2 boys were also staying at the house. 11-year-old Christopher Hughes, a neighbor, and 8-year-old Josh Ryen, the Ryen's son. Christopher was also murdered. Josh was the only survivor, although he was badly hurt. The killer or killers entered the house through the back door, and used a hatchet and possibly other weapons to attack the family while they slept. Oddly, nothing in the house was stolen except for their car. The police believed a man named Kevin Cooper was responsible. Cooper had recently escaped from a nearby prison. He had been hiding in an empty house not far from the Ryen home. Because he had a criminal record for burglary and was in the area at the time, the police arrested him. Josh, the survivor, gave different stories after the attack. At first, he said he saw more than one man, possibly Hispanic or white. Later, he said he only saw the shadow of one person. It's believed his memory changed because of the trauma he went through. Cooper said he had nothing to do with the murders. He still says he's innocent and is currently on death row. Many people believe him. Even the Ryen family's grandmother thinks Cooper didn't do it. One big problem in the case was how the police handled the crime scene. Over 70 people walked through the house, possibly ruining important evidence. Then, after Cooper was arrested, the police cleaned up the house and stored the evidence in a room that wasn't kept cold. This could have damaged anything that could help solve the case later. In 2002, Cooper asked for more DNA testing. He said the original tests were wrong and that he was being framed. Some testing was approved, but it hasn't all been done yet. Cooper and others are still waiting. There are also reasons people think Cooper might not be guilty. For example, nothing was stolen from the house except for the car, even though money was left out. If Cooper was a burglar, why wouldn't he have taken it? The only physical evidence possibly linking Cooper to the scene was one tiny blood spot, which matched his blood type, but that blood type is not rare. No hair or fingerprints of Cooper's were found in the house. Jessica was holding blonde hair in her hand when she died, and Cooper has dark hair. The stolen car was found 50 miles away, not in the direction Cooper would have taken if he was heading to Mexico, where he was later caught. This has also raised doubts. Later, a woman named Diana Roper came forward. She had been dating a man named Lee Furrow, who had a history of violence. She said Furrow came home around the time of the murders, wearing bloody clothes. She turned the clothes over to the police, but they threw them away. A shirt found at the crime scene, covered in blood, didn't belong to anyone in the Ryen family, and matched the type of shirt Furrow wore. A reporter once tried to ask a sheriff about the destroyed evidence, and he got angry and walked out of the interview. To this day, we still don't know the full truth. Kevin Cooper is still on death row. Many people believe an innocent man may be in prison. If that's true, then the real killer could still be free.